The UFC's posters simply aren't that good, aren't they? They are a formulaic, boring corporate mess that, at least to me, fail to create any excitement for an upcoming UFC event, which is one of the very few tasks that these posters actually have to do. The promotional poster is an integral part of televised combat sports. Some of the most iconic and recognizable imagery in all of combat sports are promotional posters. And this holds true for MMA and the UFC. Whether it's this, or this, these are iconic and integral images to the history of the company. However, if you ask me right now to picture an iconic poster from the last 50 or so UFC events, the first thing that truly comes to mind is that awful Vettori vs Cannonier one. I can't help but feel that the UFC posters recently, talking the last half decade to a decade ago, are failing to accomplish next to anything that a promotional poster should be doing. So let's list out the tasks that a good MMA promotional poster should be doing, and if the current formula of UFC posters are achieving these goals. 1. Let us know who is fighting and when. So getting this one out of the way, the UFC posters do achieve the bare minimum and let us know who is at the top of a card and when and where they are fighting. Can't complain about that. 2, however, a poster should create excitement for an upcoming event, tell the story of the event or highlight why we should watch this event. I don't know what this is, but it's definitely not enticing me to watch it. And 3, it should be a differential. An asset that helps make an event feel unique and sets it apart from prior events and future events. UFC posters just don't do this. Essentially, every poster fits the same formula. So I've identified 3 tasks that a good MMA poster should do, and most recent UFC posters only accomplish one of these tasks. Why is this? Why is the biggest, most resource-heavy MMA promotion pumping out the most low-effort, bland corporate template posters in the sport? Well, in this video, I aim to answer this question, further explain why I think the UFC's posters are garbage, and highlight some of the better posters in MMA's rich history. Before we get too ahead of ourselves, is the trend of UFC posters being doo-doo a recent thing? Or have they always kinda sucked? Well, taking a look back from UFC 30, which is when Zuffa and Dana White took over, I'll let you form your own opinions on quality. To me at least, yeah, these kinda suck as well. But what I do believe is that these early UFC posters do capture that correct energy, the vibe of the product at the time. The UFC during this time was, yeah, kinda trashy but unapologetically fun. All these posters did a good job of highlighting exactly what the product was. Like, let's look at Zuffa's second UFC poster for UFC 31. Like, this objectively sucks, even by 2001 standards, right? Like, Dana probably did this himself. But in a weird way, the vibe is correct. The flames with Pedro Rizzo launching a clinch knee is kinda badass, and I look at this and know exactly what the vibes of this event is going to be. I look at this one from like 2 weeks ago and have absolutely no clue if this is an MMA event or a B-tier action movie from the year 2000. So while early UFC posters were pretty rough, they did capture and tell the story of the upcoming events, and sometimes randomly they would pump out some absolute fire. UFC 45 is one of my favorite UFC posters of all time. It was their 10-year anniversary card, and this poster does such a good job of highlighting the MMA glove, which of course is symbolic for the organization on their 10-year anniversary. UFC 47 is one of the most iconic combat sports posters of all time. And yes, it's fundamentally 2 fighters face to face, but that smoked out background I feel puts our attention onto Chuck and Tito and helps display the magnitude of their rivalry. Even during the Middle Ages of the UFC, we had some incredible posters. UFC 158, 165, 179, and 181. So to answer the question, have UFC posters always been so bad? Yes and no. They've always often been poorly designed, a bit cheap, but the soulless nature of these posters is a recent thing. I'm talking the last decade or so. There are a few primary reasons as to why I think the UFC posters are so off-putting to me. The first one is just the formula. The formula of fighter facing the other fighter with their names in the middle and either some gradient background or the fighter's flag is literally every UFC poster at this stage. When we are seeing the exact same formula for a poster with just different fighters copied and pasted in, we as consumers get fatigued and bored, and at this stage of years upon years of looking at the same poster slightly changed 100 times, we become numb. We don't even notice the posters anymore. Their job now isn't to tell the story of the fight or breathe excitement into the fans, it's simply just to let you know who is fighting and when. At this stage, a UFC poster could be a plain white background, the names of the fighters, the date and location, and it would achieve effectively the same thing. Probably cost the same amount to produce as well. Telling the story of an upcoming fight is the number one missing ingredient in the UFC posters to me at the moment. I'm hoping we all remember Boss Logic's fan posters. These used to be the absolute thing a few years ago on MMA Twitter, but my favorite one of theirs was this one for UFC 281, which was Adesanya and Pereira's first MMA fight. This fan poster tells the story of the rivalry. It has the loose, degraded kickboxing ropes, letting us know that this rivalry started in a ring. And then you see the two fighters in the cage with their past ghost in there with them. Izzy's on the floor and Pereira's walking away, telling the story of their rivalry when Pereira knocked Izzy out in kickboxing. And then you have the two fighters spliced together, highlighting the interlinked nature of these two fighters' careers, and reinforcing that these two are going to be tied together in their multi-sport rivalry. In my opinion, this is what a UFC poster should be. I still know who is fighting, all you need to do is add a date and then I know when, but compared to what the official poster actually ended up being, which is typical UFC formulaic slop, I'm so much more excited for the fight through this fan poster. Reminding me of the story of their rivalry increased my chances of buying this pay-per-view tenfold. This leads me into this kinda side note here. I do want to acknowledge the UFC's Artist Series, which I guess is the UFC's endorsed fan art posters, which they can then sell and turn into NFTs. And to be fair, these are next to always awesome. However, these aren't promotional posters, nor should they be. So I don't see this as scratching the itch of the problem. These are predominantly illustrated posters, which again are super cool, but clearly designed for the UFC to sell as merch, rather than promo posters, which we are talking about here. End of side note. The more I think about it, the more I'm realizing that the UFC's posters in its current state, in a sad way, is a reflection of the UFC as a product. The UFC week in, week out is a formulaic product devoid of any organizational personality. The production has been the same for years, the only thing changing is more and more advertisements that are eating away at the visual and audio space of the product, so it makes sense that the posters for these formulaic personality devoid events are themselves formulaic and devoid of personality. I was reading up on the floating head trend in movie posters, which was the inspiration to think about UFC posters. You know, the summer box office movie poster formula of just having the stars of the movie floating around on the poster. And there are many factors that led into this trend, but it typically revolves around movie studios being risk averse. There is so much investment into these blockbuster movies that they need a guarantee for the return on investment. It just so happens that putting the face of a big movie star on their poster is usually enough to get enough people into the cinemas, even if it tells us nothing about the movie itself. And I think it's the same line of thinking for the UFC and their production of posters. They want to play it safe, stick to a formula, and they are fairly confident that all they need to do is have two relatively known fighters face each other, and that's enough to bring people in. Having an artistic rizin-esque poster sitting out front of a sports bar is definitely a risk. It might not be instantly recognizable, it requires just a little bit more thought, and while that has potential upside, it also comes with risk. So enough of being doom and gloom with the UFC posters, I'm sick of whining. Let's pump up the mood and let's talk about some of the best posters this sport has ever seen. Because MMA has and continues to pump out some of the best promotional posters in all of sports, let alone combat sports. We already mentioned rizin, and they are the undisputed champion in current MMA at producing posters, and here are a few of my favorites. The poster for the rizin World GP Super Atomweight Tournament first round 2022 poster is one of the more underrated ones in rizin's catalogue. I love the acknowledgement of Deep Jewels, which is the promotion which most of these women started from. It feels like a celebration of the division and the importance it holds in the Japanese MMA scene. Actually, the most recent rizin poster from Rizin Otoko Matsuri I also really like. It does an amazing job of capturing that energy that comes with a Tokyo Dome card. The fighter punching the taiko drum is such a cool symbol for Japanese MMA, and I love that they chose it to represent this landmark event. The Baki collaboration for the 2017 GP final round was unique, and I'd personally get annoyed if anime collaborations became standardized in rizin, but for a one-off this was pretty sick. I could talk all day about rizin posters, but we must also take the time to acknowledge the lineage of where these artistic, abstract posters came from. Pride FC posters is where it all started, and my favourite poster from Pride is probably their most iconic one, with Pride Total Elimination 2004's poster. The fighter who is heavily implied to be Fedor holding the butterfly on the glove. What does this mean? Honestly, hell if I know. I just know that for some reason it makes sense for what Pride was, and this poster evokes an emotion that makes me want to watch Pride. I can't explain it, I just feel it. Pride posters paralleled and borrowed a lot from modern Japanese art. You know, a lot of clean empty space, subtlety and abstract thinking, and it's what I love about these Japanese MMA posters. They don't need to be so direct or in your face, with clenched knees and flaming backgrounds. Now don't get me wrong, they were sometimes that, but often it was just a nice visual image that evoked the correct neurons in their audience brains, enticing them to watch. So Pride and Rizin's posters are sick, but out of all the Japanese MMA promotions throughout history, my favourite posters were in Dream. And it does suck because even as a promotion, Dream is a bit forgotten as the successor to Pride and predecessor to rizin, and next to everything about this promotion is underrated. But sticking to posters, Dream 3's poster for the Lightweight Grand Prix 2008 second round is likely my favourite MMA poster of all time. Most of Dream's posters had this airy feeling to them. It was integral to their brand identity, with the clouds and the horizon/sunset. Dream 5 and Dream 1 are also highlights for me, but Dream 3 with the people doing the sprints along the bottom with some who presumably have quit and are too tired to continue is a unique metaphor for the tournament format, MMA and competition in general. And that's the thing about this more abstract art. Some forms of imagery are just going to connect with some people more than others. I don't know why, but this one just hits for me. Now, it's not just Japan doing sick MMA posters. KSW has had some bangers in their history. Definitely a different vibe, but I particularly like KSW 48. It's not abstract like the Japanese ones, but it's just clean and bold colors help it separate it in KSW's catalogue of events. I could talk all day about sick MMA posters, and maybe I'll upload a top 10 list or something if you're interested, so let me know in the comments below. So there we have it, these are my thoughts on the landscape of UFC posters and why they are so bad at the moment. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and follow the channel, and I'll see you all in the next video.